Hello folks, welcome back to the channel. My name is Matt. If you're new here, this is a channel about Chinese martial arts and how they enrich our lives. So let's have a look at the stances this week. Okay guys, so stance number one, Gong Bu, which means bow stance, or I've heard it called a bow and arrow stance. So as I say, all of these stances, each teacher has their own variation and different styles have their own variation, but let's just give a general idea for it. So Gong Bu. So firstly, you want to make sure that your feet are at least shoulder width apart, and you can roll, I say, a football through the middle, soccer ball, whatever. Beach ball is probably too big, but making sure that the stance is wide enough. Sometimes beginners end up very narrow and it's less stable and it's harder to balance. So the idea being, we want to press from the back leg if we're punching or something like that, and that's why beginners sometimes bring up the heel when they do those punches, which in this sort of stance we want to press from the ground to generate that force coming forward. So we want that back heel on the ground. The front shin wants to be about vertical. You don't want to go too far forward because again, I'm sort of committing my weight, more likely to be pulled off balance, can affect the knee if the weight goes too far towards the toe and things like that as well. Now it's not always used for striking, certainly you can use it for sweeps as well. One of the arts I do, Tai Zu Quan, it's used for sweeping out the opponent as well. So from here, sweeping the leg and pushing from there to take out the balance. So that's Gong Bu, but notice my back foot is straight here. Sometimes, and again, some styles, each to their own, but sometimes the foot points out and I see people's knee come in here, and again that might create a bit of an imbalance on the knee. You always want to have the knee and toe pointing the same direction. So for us, if the toes are forward, the knees forward, hips are pointing forward, and that's a nice clean stance from there. Right, next one, the one that everyone has probably heard of, Ma Bu. Ma Bu is horse stance, and there's so much variation in this stance. This isn't going to encapsulate all of that, but it will give you an insight, certainly how we do it in Southern Chinese martial arts, and there's a bit of overlap as well for a lower version. So the basic version we tend to do, we call this horse stance. Now sometimes we tend to have the toes forward or turned in slightly, obviously not too much, and you want to make sure that the knees aren't coming in. Sometimes I see people end up with a big stance and they bend the knees and it ends up with, again, an imbalance. If my toes are dead forward for some stances, I want my knees dead forward as well. And so that's Ma Bu. This stance at this higher version is more typical of lots of Southern Chinese martial arts, particularly from a region called Fujian. However, there's also a lower version, which we have in Fujian, as well as loads of, that's probably the most common one you have seen it. So the other version is where the legs are closer to parallel. Now the trick is trying to keep your back nice and straight. One way you can do this is if you've got a wall at home, you can shuffle up to the wall, put your backside on the wall and try and keep yourself nice and upright from here. Beginners sometimes when they first do this end up sticking the backside out and leaning forward to counterweight that. So you want to sink down, try and open up the hips, knee and toes point the same way. So again, same for this one. You don't want to be in this stance and let the knees come in, then the feet start to prolate. You haven't got a stable stance. You want to have the feet pressing flat on the floor and then having a nice clean stance from there. That's Ma Bu. So next stance we're going to look at is Xie Bu. So Xie Bu is a cross leg crouching stance. The easiest way to do it is if you take one leg and step it behind, and then from here it's a case of trying to keep the back straight and bending the knees. So your heel will come up on the back foot. The front foot, the foot stays flat. And from here, you bend the knees, but notice how I'm not sitting on the floor. My weight is sort of between the two legs, but worst comes to worst, you could sit into that back foot there. But from here, I'm nice and upright with my stance. There is a different stance where you sit on the floor that people often tend to do where they'll sort of fall to one side. This isn't like that. So Xie Bu, we're nice and upright from here. Sometimes I've seen it at an angle, but either way, it's a good leg trainer. From here, you could change sides. Again, the back leg, heel comes up, head upright from here, and you can extend from there. So that's Xie Bu. It's quite comfortable, helps open out the hips a little bit. Obviously you might want to warm into it if you've got dodgy knees and things, but yeah, good one to work on. You can work on turning. From here, there's various exercises where they do this sort of thing, but it might be stepping forward or something like that. But either way, that's Xie Bu. So next one, we're going to look at Pu Bu. Pu Bu is a crouching stance. So this one is a classic Kung Fu stance. This one I want to get nice and low, trying to get the backside towards the floor, but make sure that your knees point out on this one. Sometimes I see people when the knee comes in if they're facing forward, and it can create an imbalance on the knee here. We want to make sure the foot is flat on the floor, so you've got a nice stable stance, and the toes and the knees point the same direction. Notice as well this front leg, we keep that bent. Sometimes people end up with this straight, certainly the way that I was taught. You don't want that completely straight, because if, you know, say someone to fall on your leg or something like that, it can be it can be problematic. So you want to have the knee slightly bent here, the toes and knees pointing out here, and then you've got this lower stance like so. You'll see as well, if I show you from the front, I don't want to be completely narrow here. If I go nice and low, it says, I don't want to be so narrow here that I'm completely side on. I actually want to bring my front foot back a little bit, like so. The reason being, in certainly the various routines I know, you want to come forward often from that stance. And so if I'm here and I come forward, my feet are wide enough that I can be stable as I transition into some sort of forward stance there. If I am too narrow here, when I turn, I'm very narrow between my legs. If I was pushed either way this way, I'm really out of balance. So if my feet are a little bit wider in that transition as I step forward, that will help me be a bit more in balance, help that step. So I want to make sure that my feet are actually a little bit wider here, might be toes to the heel and the back leg, whatever it is, but that's Xie Bu from there. And lastly, the final stance we're going to look at is called Xie Bu. Xie Bu is an empty leg stance. Sometimes you hear it called a cat stance. Now there's variations on this one in terms of the direction of the hips. It is what it is. I'll show you two variations, but just interesting for beginners that different styles have slightly different variations of doing this. The first one is where the hips are turned. So I'm not completely square on, they're slightly turned, and I'm trying to narrow my body here. My hands are on the center line like so. Notice I'm trying to protect the groin. So this is quite narrow like so. You'll see this in a few different stances. This particular way of doing it is a sort of Southern Chinese martial arts way of doing it, but you'll see variations on this throughout all of China. But what you'll also see is another variation where the hips are square. And my foot isn't completely out here, but I'm not trying to be completely on the center line like the last one. The hips are square from here, and then we'll do whatever we've got going on. You'll see this classically in Southern Chinese martial arts, where from here we do some kind of salute like so. So it's very similar, but my hips are square in these versions. It's not this where I'm trying to narrow, make myself a nice small target like so. So those are the two variations of Xie Bu. So hopefully that was useful for beginners to give you an idea of some of the stances we use in Kung Fu. There's loads of other stances. Ask any teacher and they'll be able to reel off loads of other different ones in the Fujian martial arts that I do. So Fujian is a region of China. Those styles, we have other stances where, say for example, a common one is a single bat. There's variations on this one, but one leg is in a sort of Z shape. One leg is, or potentially even a bit further back with the hips square. It depends on the style. There's loads of other ones where we've got, we end up with these sort of walking stances in Southern Chinese martial arts as well. It goes on and on and on. Stances are essential in Chinese martial arts. And I've got to say, training this stuff has totally changed my life. If you need some morning motivation to get up and go training, there's something on the screen now. If you're interested in this kind of stuff, consider hitting subscribe. The channel's about how Chinese martial arts enriches our life. If you've got this far, thanks very much. I'll see you in the next video.